Welcome to the Medical Sales Accelerator Podcast. I'm Zed Williamson.
And I'm Clark Wiederhold.
This podcast exists to put scale to the value you get from those great one-to-one conversations at conferences and sales meetings.
It's tough out there in the field, and expectations, they're not going down.
And that's why we're speaking with our guest today, Erik Trattler, Director of Business Development for TrackableMed. Erik, thank you so much for joining us today.
Zed, Clark, it is an absolute privilege. I've always been a big fan of the show, and it's surreal to be here, and especially with the most recent guests. I'm in some great company with the heavy hitters like Jeffrey Moore and Matt Dixon and Brent Adamson. So I'm a little intimidated today, to be honest, but I'm looking forward to it.
That's right. You should be. No, I'm just kidding. So Erik, you joined TrackableMed, but you come from medical device. Would you give the audience just kind of an understanding of what your career in medical device looked like?
I've been fortunate enough to work in a variety of roles in medical device, from startups to the big strategic organizations, not only in the US, but all over the world. And, I've seen that there are a few things missing in being in the field on a day-to-day basis. And that's what really attracted me to TrackableMed, because I feel like TrackableMed is that missing piece to bridge all these disconnected items that we deal with on a day-to-day basis in the field together.
And that's why I was interested to chat with you today, because, I'm a little bit biased, or a lot biased, from the standpoint of, what TrackableMed can do. You came in to TrackableMed without any understanding or experience with us specifically, but now that you've been here, you've witnessed something about what could have happened in the field for you in the past. Can you kind of walk through that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in these scenarios where I've had the technology, great technology, the reimbursement was there, the staff was fired up, but we couldn't find the patients. There was always a gap. We couldn't find the right patients. So what was that missing piece? What did I really need that I didn't know that was out there? And I think the solution is what we do here at TrackableMed. There's so many different facets that we can get involved with to assist surgeons getting treatment to these patients that they don't even know that treatment exists, and they think they're out there, that they have to live that way. So I'd love to get into more detail on, the different avenues we have depending on the scenario.
Well, it's obviously, like Clark said, it's getting tough out there and expectations don't go down. And there's some things that line up with that, right? You have, you're past the half year, you still have your quota to hit. It impacts your pay. You have different drivers of what that quota may be. Access to physicians and practices is not getting easier. You have all of these things in your way. And what I've witnessed in the time at TrackableMed is there is a belief that certain things just aren't possible from the medical device standpoint, meaning it's just not a lever that I can pull. And I think that's what you're witnessing. Am I wrong?
No, I think you're really on base there. I think some other common misconceptions are how long sometimes things take to work. I think when you put a marketing and advertising effort in place that is really around biases that prevent patients from seeking treatment, the results you see are really exponential. And I think, it brings me back to a client we have recently that within 1 week has 12 new surgical candidates, and the ROI has been fantastic.
One of the strategies that I've always witnessed get deployed, and it does make sense. So I'm not saying that this is a bad strategy, but what I want people to put their eyes on is some specific numbers around the idea of referred patients. So if you work with a specialty practice and you're trying to drive patient volume through referral opportunities, there's value there because these patients go to the primary care doctors they trust, and those doctors are seeing the likely patients who would be candidates for your therapy. The scary number is that only 35% of referred patients actually ever make it to a specialist. And so what's interesting is think about how many patients will get referred by primary care. So imagine they tell 10, 3 make it. And so think of all the effort that goes into driving that specific behavior and that activity, and only 3 make it.
And you know what fires me up about that, Zed, is the 3 that make it, they're probably not going to have the right insurance. So they might not even be able to get the treatment that they need from that physician. And I think you're referencing that really important study that was done that looked at over 100,000 patients, and only 36,000 actually completed their appointment. So when we're relying on a system in the field on referrals from primary care to get to our specialist surgeon or physician, it's a broken model. And I think we attended the Becker's meeting in Chicago a couple weeks ago. And you know what's interesting is there was a lot of frustration in the room. There was a lot of frustration from surgeons that they put so much time and effort into building a pathway for referrals, and they're just not getting the ROI of their time. I mean, their most important asset is their time, and they're spending time away from their families at night, going to dinners, putting on not to say not their real face, but it's hard to go out every night and meet new people and network. And then no matter what you do, you're only going to get at best 35% of the referrals to actually come into your office. So we do see that some surgeons are tired, so they're taking things into their own hands. So the good thing is we do see practices that are advertising. And you might be sitting there in your car right now and going, yeah, my doctor, he's tried Facebook. He told me it doesn't work. You're absolutely right. It doesn't work. When you have the wrong message, it's not going to connect with anyone emotionally. It's not going to work. It's a complete waste of money and a complete waste of time. So you really need to work with an organization like TrackableMed for an advertising campaign. So if you have a surgeon out there that is spending $1 on advertising, we can get them a 10x return from what they're used to.
You mentioned taking some control, and that's the way I always thought about it in the field as a sales leader, is trying to take some control over patient demand with my customer. There are a lot of folks listening that find themselves in a spot where there are certain ailments or certain frustrations that lead themselves to be good candidates for certain surgical procedures or therapies, right? And at the end of the day, hey, you want more of those patients in front of the docs that believe what you believe. So if it's something that's good for their practice as well and something they want more of, let's hope that you're in that situation. If you're not, probably want to go look somewhere else. But Erik, what you're witnessing is the ability for a rep or a sales leader to go make a connection with one of their customers that's bought into what they believe in, and give them a service that's going to get more of those specific patients in their clinic, right?
Yeah, Clark, that's 100% correct. And I think this isn't for everybody. So this is, if you're happy with, your day to day, and, you don't want to work too hard, or you don't want to be too busy, this is not for you. You shouldn't reach out. It's really not a good fit. But if we want to work with surgeons that want to take over the world, they want to dominate their marketplace. So you have to think, even in my career, there's only a handful of surgeons or clients that I've met that had that mentality. So, but when you meet them, it's one of those things. Does that resonate with you, Clark, at all?
100%. Yeah. And here's another piece. You talked about you just didn't have the patients in front of the customers earlier in your conversation, right? Hey, you did the training, the staff was bought in, like you'd walk through the patient journey when they get there, but they weren't there. And for some clarity, I'm pretty sure what you're talking about is there just weren't enough of them there, right? There's patients coming in the door. The docs are probably busy. The staff's going crazy. But at the end of the day, if that practice and those providers would be happy with more of those patients, those specific patients in their clinic, there's things you can do, a la get connected with Erik, get connected with TrackableMed, and we'll build plans out so that we get more of those patients in the door. They're not necessarily looking for more, but more of the right patient. And I think that's the key.
Yeah, Clark, I remember when I was working for a startup, and there was just so few cases out there that, I'm sure someone's driving to the OR right now, and I'm about to give you some bad news. Your case is about to get canceled, and you're going to wait there. You're going to wait there all day to find out that there's some kind of issue. There's an issue with anesthesia. There's something totally out of your control, and you can't be back in that hospital for 2 weeks. So what are you going to do? You really need to have an extra tool to grow the base for yourself. So having these physicians that are bought in, and you could be a private practice, or, you could even be a hospital system. I think what we do see with hospital systems, and this is another common theme I saw at the Becker's meeting, was a lot of frustration from surgeons, because these are neurospine surgeons, that the hospitals are advertising for these robot procedures, and patients are coming in asking for robot procedures when they don't need that robot for that procedure. So there's a big disconnect, and it was a big frustrating point for the surgeons. So if you are advertising and you're not doing it, you could be doing it for the wrong thing and getting the wrong outcome. So it's important to kind of work backwards. And I think that's what TrackableMed really does. We start with the goal, and then we find a way to get to the result. And what I mean by that is, some other places might say, oh, you got to run Facebook, you got to do this, you got to do a Google campaign. We're agnostic to the tool here. We have subject matter experts across all platforms. So depending on the market and depending on the end goal, you craft a plan that's going to deliver the best result for the lowest investment. And, we always spend our clients' money like it's our own.
Erik, people have heard us, Zed and I, on this podcast talk a lot about behavior, a lot about bias and heuristics over the last couple of years. But you coming, fresh out of the field, selling capital at the time, and not being on the inside until the last 9 months or so, what surprised you as you started to see the bias language, the messaging built around emotional connection pay off? Was there anything that stood out to you?
First and foremost, I think we'll start with the low-hanging fruit, which was confirmation bias, something I never took into account when I was in the field, that the second someone is investing in a program, they're going to find more patients for what they're investing in. And I'll just use patients because that's what we're talking about. So it's such a powerful bias, and it's something that I'm sure we all can relate to. Once you've spent money on something, it's a great idea. So that's been one of the really powerful biases that I think, we always talk about here.
It's the behavior thing is important, because, someone out there may be a little bit foggy of scenario. And so here's what we find is, you've got a customer who's bought in. They want to do more. They are ready to do more, and they just need more patients. And they've got a crappy website. They don't have a way to get the patients. That's a good example of when to introduce someone to TrackableMed. You may have someone who they just aren't that good at the conversation. And this may seem strange, but they're actually seeing the patients, but they need the patients to ask for the therapy. And that's another good instance to introduce TrackableMed to your customer, because that's what we will create, is patients specifically asking for the therapy. And then there's also some of your customers that actually do get it, and they are hammering the advertising. They are investing money. They are tweaking their website. And I will tell you, we just reviewed over the last couple of months over 500 individual private practice message that was been run, spent thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on these ads running, that these messages created with the companies they used. And 99% of them were designed to fail at the message standpoint. So if you have a customer who's spending a dime on advertising, it makes sense to introduce them to TrackableMed. And going to the behavior aspect, the reason why, because I get this question, why does it work so well when you take this approach? And it's something that we refer to as the untapped addressable market, the UAM. In healthcare, we treat this world as patients who are seeking treatment. But we already know from behavior is that patients don't always seek treatment when they need it. I'm curious, Erik, did anything around that kind of realization when you got into TrackableMed, did any of that strike you, as a surprise that there's this huge population of people who actually need help, but they're biased against seeking it?
Oh, absolutely. And I think we can all relate to in the field is a lot of when you're in the OR and that case is a train wreck from day one. So how much better would it have been if that patient went and saw their physician 2 years ago? They were still a candidate for surgery 2 years ago. They're not on the table for 2 years after to get help. And I used to work in the UK, so things were a lot slower. You couldn't get access to your surgeons quicker. There was you had to be on a list to get surgery. So the cases we had to use our technology with were not the first cases you want to be in. It was really the most challenging, most difficult procedures. So there are all these patients out there that, they don't know that there's an option for them. They don't know that there's a treatment available to them. So that's really the thing I think we can all relate to is why didn't this person come in sooner? I mean, ask your physician that. Do you ever have you don't hear from patients that wish they would have got this treatment sooner, do you? Is that a common theme? I mean, I think we can all relate to that. We've all heard that before. And I think just going back to what Clark said, the previous question too was, I think also in my time, I didn't realize how much emotion played into decision-making. And I think that's what TrackableMed really understands is I think I was firsthand guilty of, backing up the data dump truck, trying to connect with people logically, but it's actually reversed. So that's not how decisions are made. And I think our understanding of that and designing messaging and campaigns around that is the way that we're able to make things really effective. If knowledge equaled awareness, no one would smoke and everyone would wear a seatbelt. So that's not the world we live in. And I think it's really important to always keep that in the back of your mind.
It's a really good point. That idea that sometimes in advertising, in marketing, that we just need to educate. We just need to get the word out there. And sometimes even that word awareness is used wrong. Like, hey, we could do an awareness campaign, which means I'm going to run a message that has my fancy logo in front of people. That's not awareness. Awareness is when someone understands. So you talked about no one would smoke. That person who knows it's not a good idea to smoke, they get a bad diagnosis and they immediately quit. That's awareness. And the thing is you can create that in all patient types earlier in disease states, which is better for the patient, better for the practice. It's better for everything to get patients the help they need earlier.
I always thought about it like this. If you believe that for the right patients, what you have in your bag is better for them and is better for them likely earlier, then it's like your duty and obligation to have your customers get those patients in sooner, right? And again, with an assumption that that's a patient and from a strategic and an economic perspective, that's healthy for the practice, it's healthy for the ASC, and it makes sense, hopefully those things are aligned, then it also makes good business sense. And if there is nothing more true today than specifically with private practices, their need to be driving profitable patients through their practice, because it's really tough. They are pinched both on the reimbursement side as well as the cost side right now. They can't raise their prices like the local restaurant. As inflation and wage inflation and things are creeping on them and their costs go up, their reimbursements in so many scenarios are actually going down. So the time that they have in that exam room is that much more critical. So this is a message that's going to be very welcome by portions of your client base, your customer base that are looking for things to improve their business. They also want to do more of the procedures that they like doing. So it's a win-win. And we love those success stories that Erik talked about earlier, where we've got a new client. This never gets old. It really doesn't. Mm-hmm. And it took a while to get everybody on board in terms of saying, yes, let's do this, let's invest. And then week one, what was the number, Erik? It was
12 surgical, 12, yeah, 12
in the next 2 weeks.
12 surgical candidates, not just people looking
yeah.
for an appointment.
Surgical candidates, man.
Right,
They're in there. They're complaining of the issues that lead towards that case that doctor wants, that you need. And ideally, the patient, even better is the patient didn't have to find out from their friend or their aunt who happened to know a doctor that believes what you believe. They had control over the throttle of new patient demand and took it. So I love the way you mentioned that earlier, Eric, of taking control of that.
Yeah. And I think as sales professionals, we're always looking to add value. So, and what does that mean, right? Everyone has a different understanding of what adding value is. But for me, I mean, imagine if you were in the position where you could help your customer achieve their financial goals, whether it's maybe they want to get that second house, maybe they want to get a boat, or hey, maybe they only want to work 3 days a week. How are they going to be able to do that? And you could be that person that is the guide, and you would get thought of on such another level than just another person knocking on the door, because you're actually, you're really contributing to that person's financial success. And that's one of the cool things about medical devices. You have the opportunity to help patients in surgery, but then you also have these financial opportunities for your surgeons and your physicians and also yourself. So I think it's one of those really win-win scenarios.
Yeah. And kind of coming full circle, right? At the beginning, you were talking about having control, and look, we opened it. Expectations are going down from anybody that I've talked to across any commercial organization. With a lot of macroeconomic things happening over the last couple of years, and then over the last several months, it's tough. It's a hard environment to sell in right now in a lot of different scenarios. So give yourself every edge. If you can do something that's going to be seen as valuable for your customer, and it puts you in position to be able to, sell more widgets, feels like a no-brainer to me. Feels like a conversation worth having. We can certainly help you go in the right direction with certain customers. I know Erik has conversations daily with reps that are looking to have an edge in their marketplace.
Yeah. And Clark, it's really across all specialties. So it's not pigeonholed into any specialty. We worked with them all. And cool thing about our team is we've all been in the field. So I think that's really unique. We've all got medical device sales experience, I think over 60 years across the team. So it's really fun to work with a team that's actually been in the trenches, been in the field, and carried the bag. I think that's a really unique thing too about TrackableMed.
Well, Erik, I appreciate you taking the time and spending it with us today. We're going to put a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes. And we'll put a link to the UAM that we talked about, the Untapped Addressable Market as well. And really appreciate you taking the time today.
It has been an absolute pleasure and a privilege. Thank you, Zed and Clark.
Sure thing. Visit medicalsalesaccelerator.com while you're there. You can sign up for an email list to find out about upcoming episodes. You can suggest a topic or a guest, and you can download a resource that helps you communicate better with your customers.
If you found value in today's episode, do a few things for us. Subscribe to the podcast. It'll make sure you don't miss the next episode that drops and you don't lose that value. I want you to drop some stars. We love those 5 stars. Leave us a review. And last but not least, go to the little square with the arrow at the top, wherever you listen to podcasts, and send this episode to your friends, your family, your mom and your daddy. We greatly appreciate it. Erik, it was a pleasure having you on. Thanks again. Make it a great week, everybody.